Okay, great. So welcome to this week's Apache OpenWhisk Technical Exchange. I'm Dave Grove. I'm your moderator for today. It's my first time moderating, so bear with me on that. So you have the usual kind of agenda. We'll go through introductions for anyone this is their first technical exchange call, just to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the community and say what you're working on or interested in about OpenWhisk. And we'll hopefully go through some significant changes in PRs. Marcus, you're on, so maybe you can think about that for a minute or two and then take that over when we get there. And then we got 3 technical topics. They're all demos. So Sean's going to demo the .NET runtime he's been working on and talk about that. Pretty will talk about Whisk deploy with zip actions, and I'll do a little demo of running OpenWhisk on Kubernetes directly on top of Docker for Mac without needing another Minikube in the way. And then the most important thing is we'll pick the moderator for the next thing in 2 weeks. Pass the baton that way. So who's new on the call this week? Who wants to introduce themselves?
This is my first time dialing in. This is Sean Black.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a architect at a reinsurance company in St. Louis.
Okay, great. Welcome. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So Marcus, can you take us through any significant changes or PRs that happened in the last 2 weeks?
I can't really. I was on vacation. Haven't really paid attention to anything. Okay.
So I don't know. Has anyone else been paying attention? Tyson or? I have to admit that I didn't prepare for it. I can talk quickly on just the Kubernetes subprojects. You're going to see one of the things, which is this demo on using OpenWhisk on top of Docker. There were some changes for that. We can now have instructions for deploying OpenWhisk on top of Amazon's Elastic Kubernetes service as well. So we've got instructions for Minikube, Amazon, Google, IBM. So we just need to pick up some instructions for Microsoft's Azure Cloud, and we'll have covered all the major providers. That'll be a good step.
I just scrolled through some of the commits. Some notable changes maybe invokers are now no longer need to be uniform in terms of their memory. Each invoker can have a differing size of memory. I guess that's just the first step in getting into heterogeneous invoker pools. Mm-hmm. And one more notable thing that popped into that I was wondering about, you will now have the ability to limit the amount, the allowed kinds that each subject is or each namespace is allowed to create in the system. I think that got in as well. And another thing that got in that's a little bit more on the technical side is that we now no longer have that. I think we no longer have the fallback to polling out of CouchDB if something weird happens on the way from the invoker back to the controller that's getting built out, because it seems it has proven that that's not really needed anyway.
Yeah, that's James did that one. That was a good find.
Or providers?
Let me see. I did some recently updates, some bugs, some minor bugs. Like I thought somebody opened an issue, but I haven't found it. But I opened a second one. Was the current directory, when you create a zip action using Docker skeleton, it wasn't the root of the zip file. So if you created a bash, like we support bash or Perl or whatever executable, the root of the directory was, I think it was / whatever the proxy was. It wasn't like the root of the zip file. So if you included like a file that you want to read or SSH key that you wanted, like those were the use cases that people brought up, like an SSH key that you included in the zip file, or another file that you want to read, or a client certificate file to connect to Postgres SQL. You were not able to find it. So I updated the Docker skeleton with that, and then updated the other ones that depended on that. I similar issue was in Node.js, but I think it was more than 2 weeks I fixed that one. That was the same problem, that if you extended the Node.js Docker image and you did npm install things, the current directory of the node modules, if you do npm install something, it will override the rest. So we move the node modules to the top root. So then you can override any node modules in the Node.js runtime. I think that's it. Refresh some of the proxy for the Python proxy. I was using a very old version of G-Event and Flask, so I updated those to the latest version, and using G-Event, it had a different API, so I updated those. I think that's it for runtimes. But I think the agenda, maybe we don't have Go, but we may have .NET. We'll discuss that later. But Go is looking better. Working with Michelle, testing it, and giving him feedback. And he did a PR last night, and I started reviewing it, and it's looking much better, more simplified to do Golang. So if that looks good, that PR looks good, I think it's just merge it and then add Golang as the first citizen in the default deployment, and then maybe replace the structures that we have today for Go, which I think people are having trouble.
Okay, cool. All right, so why don't we go ahead and shift over and let Sean take over. I'll stop sharing, Sean, and you can grab the screen and give us a demo about the .NET runtime and the great work you've been doing there.
Sure. So I've never used Zoom before, so I'm just going to assume how to share.
Yeah, so there should be a meeting. Yep.
All right. Yep. So just give some background. I've been a .NET developer for a long time, and I've been using another function as a service platform that's not OpenWhisk, but it piqued my interest in function as a service. So I started looking at hostable options, and I found OpenWhisk, but then I realized that there is no .NET runtime. So I figured it would be good to take the time to use my expertise in the C# world and put one together for OpenWhisk. So my initial version of this really didn't follow the runtime skeleton that you guys had, just because I wasn't too familiar with Scala or Gradle. But I took some time over the past week and a half to kind of get things to where it played well with Gradle, and the Scala unit test would run with the base action tests that you guys have, and then the .NET specific runtime tests that I put together. So the code base is out on GitHub under my repo, which is under Sean Allen 85. So everything's out there. Including a couple of examples on how to build one of the functions that you want to deploy, how to deploy it, what the expectations are for creating the action. So one thing that this doesn't do, that Java does, like the Java runtime will kind of like search for a main method if you don't define one. But coming from a different function as a service background, everything is explicitly defined. So that's kind of how I went with this one, where we can define the assembly that contains the type of the method. Then we have the type, and then we have the method itself. Show you guys what I put together following the skeleton. So I closed my repo, and it's my first time running it with the GitHub repo, but hopefully this all works out. But basically this will build our Docker image, and what I have this Docker image doing is I actually have it pulling down the .NET SDK image, building the source code, and then actually starting a new image and copying the artifacts from the build to the runtime Docker container. So that's what this is going through right now. So it'll build everything, make sure everything runs as expected, and again, just copy the output over. So it should be finishing up here in a second.
Hey, Sean, this is great. Can you just make the font a little bit bigger?
If I knew how, yeah.
Command plus.
Command plus in the terminal.
All right.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, I'm new to the Mac world, and I'm running on a Mac, so I don't know all the fancy commands. So now that I have that done, I've already done the Gradle install, so I'm going to skip that, but I'm going to go ahead and run the unit tests that I put together for the runtime. And what I did for this was I have one single solution. So to give you some background, in the Java world, you guys have like a Gradle backend or like a Maven build process that kind of just traverses the source directories and test directories and just kind of builds what was ever defined in those directories. In the .NET world, we have project files and solution files. So it builds based off of what was in a project or in a solution. So my test project that I put together uses a .NET Gradle plugin, builds the assembly, and that plugin itself actually saves it as a tar, a gzip tar file. So I, for the most part, unpack it and repack it as a zip file because the runtime itself expects as a zip file. But then this will take that assembly, that zip file that was outputted from my test project, publish it to the Docker container that's running from the Scala test and execute the functions. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the other side, but let me minimize this. So there's again, a handful of the base tests that the Scala action tests have that these all pass through, and then there's a handful of tests that also are specific to the runtime, the .NET runtime itself. So this is just going through all of it. Should be finishing up, I think, hopefully in the next 30 seconds.
That's great. I guess since you've added a new runtime, we've had a few community contributed runtimes. I guess I'm curious your experience in at least how we've documented things. Was that helpful in terms of the tests that's there? You know, what are some things we could have done better? What are some things that you might have found confusing?
You know, coming from the Microsoft background, I wasn't too familiar with the Gradle or Scala side of things, and you guys have been definitely helpful with that. So not taking that into consideration, I would say the documentation is pretty well put together and straightforward on how to put one together. Like the thing that took me the most time was, again, just the lack of familiarity with Gradle and Scala. So, but I think everything else went pretty well.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. Understanding the /init versus /run, we had some trouble with that, but recently Roderick documented that made it much easier.
So for my .NET development, I use IntelliJ's writer, which is their C# or .NET IDE. So this is what I was talking about whenever we have solutions and then projects within a solution. So I can have many projects listed out here if I wanted to. So these are the source code or the bits of source that are used in all the unit tests for the runtime. So I have an alt echo, which basically does the write line for the std out and std error, and then just passing the args back. Echo just returns the args back. The environment runs through, and we basically pass the environment variables that we expect back into the JSON message to the caller. Simple error return, the action's unhappy, which I think is one of the standard unit tests. Throw an exception, just like in the Java one, we validate that this is flowed through to the client in the console appropriately. One thing that the .NET runtime expects is it expects the constructor of the type to have to be empty, so there are no parameters. So this validates that if there are no empty, it'll fail. Here we can return an element response, which is one of the unit tests, and then here's the standard Unicode test, where we pass in a delimiter and we return the delimiter, and then I believe that's a snowman, and then the delimiter again in a winter object. So all this was up and running, past the unit test, and with the help from Carlos yesterday, I was able to get the a Bluemix account up and running, and I was able to publish my delimiter or my Unicode test out to Bluemix as a web function and execute it to where we get the caret snowman caret as a response, and that's what I've put together so far.
Awesome.
Yeah, proof that it works, right?
Yep. So any questions or comments or concerns?
This looks great to me. I think, you know,
Yeah, it's fantastic.
if you're open to donating this to Apache, I think, you know, you've already got the code, the tests, documentation.
GitHub has the GitHub has a structure. I thought I needed to buy a Windows machine, but you show everything on Mac, so I'm happy with that. So Linux can do this. I did .NET like 20 years ago, but I'm looking forward. I wanted to see this. In terms of Apache, yeah, this will be a great contribution. I'll be talking on Slack and the dev list. I'm willing to create the repo for the runtime and help you move forward and have this runtime as first citizen. Just so if somebody watching the video later or now, anyone that knows .NET will be helpful to get some other contributors to help out, because there might be questions from users, and I'm just going to start learning it. But if there's others have .NET background, it'll be useful.
Yeah, I will say the only thing I didn't put into the repo was any Travis integration, just because I'm not too familiar with the Travis side of things, and I kind of figured.
Yeah, don't worry about that. This is super easy. And you have the Gradle test command, and that's basically it. And yeah, but I'll help with that when I create the repo in Apache. I'm pushing the image. And
I have a question. Did you use the Docker skeleton as a basis for this runtime?
Initially, I used the Java implementation as my guide for creating the .NET one, and that's purely at the runtime level. And then I used the Docker and the Java repos as a guide for getting it set up to work with the unit tests and all the Gradle commands.
So at the moment, it's using the Docker skeleton as a basis or the Java one?
Neither.
Yeah, those were only used as guides. This is actually like a first-class citizen runtime for .NET on the platform.
It's a .NET web. It's a .NET. If I read it correctly, it said .NET web server listening on port 8080, and it loads a DLL dynamically or something like that.
Yeah, so I'll load up the source code for that right now, just to give some background, and hopefully this is the right bit of code. So basically, using again like the Java as a guide, because Java is pretty similar to .NET, but you know, of course there are differences between the two. We do have an assembly, a .NET assembly that runs, and whenever it runs, it creates a web host where we expose two endpoints. The endpoints are init and run, and this all runs on port 8080. The init class itself will take in the zip file. The zip file will contain all of the, it'll contain the assembly with your methods, and also contain any assemblies that are needed for, or any dependencies that you have, right? So if you have assemblies for parsing Parquet files or parsing CSV files or anything like that, that'll be included in the zip file. Sorry. What this will basically do is validate that the zip file that's being uploaded meets all the requirements. So we validate that there's a main, that there's a binary, that there's a code parameter being passed in up through the JSON. We validate that the main method itself is in the format of the assembly, the type of the function. And then we get the code value, and we expect it to be a base64 value of the zip file. We attempt to decompress it. If we're not able to, we error out. And if everything works as planned, we set a couple of variables and return a run object. And then that run object is used in the run endpoint. So we make sure that our run is expected, so the type, the method, and the constructor are not null. And if any of those are null, we say that we can't invoke an uninitiated action. And we pass the value that's being, or we parse the value that's being passed into the method, set the appropriate variables. And then after we set all the appropriate environment variables, we pull out the value object and we pass it into the method that was defined. So this is not using like .NET, like a .NET executable, running in a Docker skeleton. This is actually a Docker image that's running, I guess, at its initial command, a .NET runtime that'll take in the assembly and allow you to execute the function. So it's just how, it's exactly how like the Java one or the PHP or the, you know, the Python ones would be functioning.
Yeah, you implemented the entire runtime, including the init, run, and so on. Okay, okay, understood. You are using the dynamic loading of .NET to adding more code to the action. Okay, okay, thank you. Understood.
And yeah, this is all using the .NET Core 2.1 runtime, which is the new .NET initiative coming from Microsoft.
Fantastic.
Anything else, or
any other questions or comments before we switch over to Pretty? All right, this is great, Sean. Thanks so much, and looking forward to seeing it get contributed and really drive, become a key piece of the community. So this is great.
Awesome. You're welcome.
Okay, cool. All right, so Preeti, do you want to go ahead and grab the screen and do your demo next?
Yep, sure, definitely. Thank you. All right, so Matt and I have been working on Whisk deploy from past a week or a couple of weeks. There was a pattern that I forgot his name. Andrea was working, and we had a use case where with the zip action, we needed an enhancement where we can provide a list of files or a directory saying include these files or directories along with the main index.js. I'm using an example of Node.js, but it works pretty much for any runtime. So traditionally, we have this kind of use case where our manifest is here, and then we have the actions, and then we have the index file and the package. And for creating a zip action, it needs index or package JSON at the root level. So this is how we used to specify our manifest, where we say function is actions and greeting, and basically everything under this particular directory is getting pulled, and then we create a zip action using those files. So we have added a functionality. It's still it's still in PR. It's still a work in progress, pretty much done, but still PR. We have added functionality to include a list of files. So let me show you. So for example, so here are a few examples, and this is all being committed, and this is all being part of Whisk deploy GitHub repo. So we have example of greeting one, for example, and that particular greeting one is referring to, it has index.json and then package. Then the index file here has a reference to the files under com. It says that, okay, I need this file. So I have a manifest here. Can you see my manifest?
Yep.
So I have a manifest. I'm saying greeting one is my action. My source code is here under actions greeting one, and I need to include this particular file. So it has a pattern of saying source, and then we can also say where is the destination. By default, the source path is being preserved. But if you want to specify explicit saying that it has to go under this particular directory, basically we can rename it to, or provide a destination which is different from the source. So I have a couple of examples here saying how exactly what all are supported. We have support for wildcards as well. I have this common, and then there is an example of library libs where we have under libs, we have multiple libraries, and then each library has its own JS file. So let me just run with deploy for the include. And so right now it's creating all these actions. I have 10 actions as an example. If you run it in a verbose mode, it literally spits out what file was specified under include, or what path was specified under include. And as a result, these all files are being included in the zip file. So for example, if I run my let's take this example, and basically it's able to find the included library and then load the information from there. So we have different good morning, hello, all those basically showing that the included library is being, it's able to work with those libraries. So this is still PR, will be very soon in the Wisp deploy repo, and we'll have a release after we are done with the include and most likely exclude as well. Exclude is a separate feature, but I'm trying to basically club everything. So let's see. So
yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, Pretty does an excellent job with the design we talked about, so that we can add exclude as a separate PR later on, so you can actually exclude. And again, if it's not apparent, it's recursive as well. So
cool. Any questions or feedback for Pretty?
So the exclude, it's can I put a directory that I can exclude the no modules folder? Those might be too big. It might be like 300 megs, and I can exclude it.
yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the intent. Yeah.
Okay.
We marshal all the includes, and then we subtract the excludes.
Okay.
Any other question? All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then I'll take back over and get to our third demo. I actually did this correctly. No. All right, so what I wanted to show people quickly today is just, I've been playing around with using, so Docker 18.06, which came out in June of 2018 for Mac and Windows, includes a built-in Kubernetes server. So you can actually run Kubernetes inside of Docker without having to run any other virtualization layer. And so I put some instructions for this in the Kubernetes repository. It's actually fairly easy to do. And so what I wanted to do now is just show a quick demo of what that looks like and some of the things you can do with it. So the first thing is here's my Docker daemon. So if I want to enable this, I open the Docker preferences panel. I click on the Kubernetes pane, and I click the Enable Kubernetes checkbox and wait for about 30 seconds. And it goes off and installs a kubectl command for me, CLI for me, and then starts running Kubernetes within Docker. So it's up, it's running, it's ready to go. And if I look, get my console, is the font on this big enough, or should it be even ridiculously bigger? Is this okay?
It's fine on my side.
Okay. All right, so if I look at my kube control context, if I can type, I've got several of them, but the one that's active is Docker for desktop. And so that's
the new name.
Yep, that's the name of the kube configuration for this thing. And so if I do kubectl get nodes, it'll tell me I have a single node, Docker for desktop, and it's ready. It's been running for 12 days. I can use helm command so I can see what I've got here. I have nothing running. And so there's some detailed instructions for this in the repo, but basically what you have to do is you have to define a mycluster.yaml, which has some key things in it. So you have to tell about the ingress. So for, just like with Minikube, we're gonna use a node port ingress, and you have to pick a random port that's available on your machine. I try to use 31001. And this API host name is the IP address for my, if I go, kubectl describe nodes pipeline grep. The IP address out of this, that's the IP address for my the kube master node that's running inside of Docker. So that's the one piece of information you need to get. It'll probably be different. I don't feel like pulling for runtime, waiting for lots of runtime, so I run with a small set of those. And what I'm going to demo today is actually doing some local development. So in my controller file, I've stuck in this very exciting message where it's going to say, hello, Apache OpenWhisk Tech Exchange, to show you that I'm running a local version of the controller along with images for the rest of it. It's going to pull from Docker Hub. And the way you do that is you just use the Whisk controller instead of OpenWhisk controller. You have to change the image pull policy to if not present instead of always. Otherwise, it will try to pull Whisk controller from Docker Hub and it's not going to find it. All right, so by doing that change, I can run a local image. And so rather than typing, I'll get my helm command. All right, so my helm command, so I'm basically do the helm install into the OpenWhisk namespace, which I've already created. I'm just using a kubectl command. And then get that to go. So now if we look, so here's the helm status. You can sort of see what's going on there. If we do kubectl get pods, you can see what's happening. I can also do Docker PS. These are just Docker pods. So I can also look at them with Docker. So they're just regular Docker containers running. And so now what we're doing is we just have to wait for the system to come up. And the thing that takes the longest is the job for initializing the couch DB. It takes about a minute usually. So if we sort of look at this, we can impatiently watch its progress as it turns along and initialize all the tables for us. Once that happens, the rest of it will sort of just start up. Looking at the pods, you can see if you've never sort of looked at the OpenWhisk coming up from Kubernetes, here's the controller pod. It's running two init jobs, one of which is waiting for Kafka to be up, and the other one is waiting for CouchDB. And this is telling you that one of the two of those is completed, and we're still waiting for this init CouchDB job to finish.
Now, one thing I do when I deploy, I use Stern or Ktail. It's a good, and you see progress.
Okay, cool.
Just as I learn more Kubernetes every day.
Yep, exactly. All right, so now my controller is up. It's installing the catalog and route management, but if I do kubectl logs controller 0, type those through more, here at the top, we'll see our exciting message saying hello to the Tech Exchange. So it's really running a local controller image that we just built, that I built just before. So now, let's see if it's up yet. My
Is
fan
it
is,
because the policy by default or the policy that we have is do not pull if it's already available?
so the default pull in the Helm chart, the default policy for anything we tag as latest is always, just to make sure we're always pulling the latest images. So I overrode that in my
In your YAML file.
to say if not
It's not present. No, I missed that. Sorry.
So that way it'll just pick the one from my disk. It won't try to go off to Docker Hub and look for this Whisk controller image.
Yeah, that's the key.
Which won't be
People
there.
go crazy try to replicate this is because of
Yeah. Yep. So right. So we can create an action if we want. Woo. All right. Cool. It's not ready yet. It's a demo. A real demo here. What happened?
502, that'll be the ingress.
All right, there it was.
Oh, yeah.
It waits for, the invoker wasn't actually healthy yet. The controller was up, but the invoker wasn't good. But now, thanks, there we go. And if we look at Docker, we can see the various containers that are running. And here's some of the actual Node.js 6 actions that are pre-warm containers. One of those is running my hello action. The other one is the health action. They've been paused. Here's a pre-warm component we haven't used yet. It's running along. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to show, since we have still a little bit of time, is we're going to actually edit this. Right, so we'll stick in a second message. Say hello again. Save that. We can go off and do our Gradle command to rebuild that image. So this is something where I haven't found a great way to do this. So after we rebuild the image, we're going to have to tag it. Give it a different tag name to get Helm to reload just that image. So this is a piece of the workflow that I haven't figured out a smooth way to do it yet as Ansible for redeploying just a piece of it. So I'd love for someone else who knows more about Helm to help me figure that out.
What do you mean? You can just kill the controller and the pod will restart and use the new image bits, no?
So what I wanted to do is there's actually a Helm command. So if I'll show you what I was doing, and then maybe there's a better way to do this.
Oh, okay.
Controller. Yes. All right, so now if I look at my Docker images, I've got that Whisk controller v2, so now I can go back into my description of my cluster and override that parameter. And now there's a Helm command called update, which says look at the current state of the chart and the existing state of the chart and bring them back into lines with each other. So if I do this Helm upgrade command,
which one?
I'm sorry.
Upgrade OW.
Right. So
okay.
This is the name of my chart. This is the path to the chart on the current directory, and this is the override file.
The delta of with the new file.
Right. And so what this did when I was trying it an hour ago is it basically redeploys just the controller. So it's been upgraded. So if we do qcontrol get pods, we'll see that the controller is terminating. This takes about 60 seconds. We can also see the catalog job. Right, we were having trouble with the ingress right when we started up. And so installing the OpenWhisk catalog and the root management packages, those jobs failed the first time or two, and then they went again.
So the Helm upgrade looks fine. What's the problem? I like that one.
Yeah, so the Helm update's fine. The only thing that's a little bit annoying about it is I actually had to give this a different tag. So I haven't figured out how to
You can just not use Helm and just try to delete the pod, and we just restart.
Right. Right. That might also work to delete at the kube level.
Yeah, kube level using with kubectl. But
right.
Yeah, this is good because I was trying to figure out how to do like life cycle and promotions and rollout updates with Helm. So I didn't know about the upgrade command.
All right, so now if we go look at the kube control logs for the controller 0, we get 2 messages. So it's actually running the version we just rebuilt. So it's a little bit more cumbersome in the Ansible workflow, but it's not horrible. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to show people. Questions, comments, things we can do better?
One comment is, I think I'm 99.9999% sure that now with this flow, we open the door for Windows users, people that have Windows machines. They should be able to use Docker for desktop, the Windows version, and be able to follow this flow, right?
I believe
Helm,
so.
Helm comes for Windows, and kubectl comes for Windows, and Kubernetes comes for Windows, and in theory, like Windows users should be able to do this Kubernetes locally development.
Yeah, I think that's right. If I had a Windows machine, I would try it. But so if someone has a Windows machine sitting around and wants to try it,
I have one in the closet. That's why I was saying before that about .NET, I was going to take it out, but now I'll take it out for this because I want to test more Windows stuff, because I think there's a lot of developers that could be contributors that can do a lot of things. And if we just enable them, they can help out. So this is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is supposed to Docker for Windows from June 2018 is also supposed to support this with a similar kind of flow. You click the option, you have a Docker, a kube cluster on your laptop, and then everything else should just work.
Yeah. And last week, Docker released a blog post talking about the desktop, that they changed the name to Docker for desktop, and they're going to do more features and do different versioning. So they're doing good on those tools for desktop. So that's good. Unless somebody have tried already on Windows, or if it knows, I'll give it a try when I have a chance. But if somebody else can try it on Windows and just open a bug or just open an issue to discuss it, or the dev list, because I think for some folks, it might be better just to not deal with Vagrant and just deal with Cube.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll have to do a little bit more documentation about how to do things. And I was skipping between Helm commands and kubectl commands because I'm used to using both. All right.
Well, this is a good deep dive.
Okay, so yes, that's the third demo. We have about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Before I let people escape, is there a volunteer to moderate next time? Silence.
Let's see.
It's October 24th.
We have a row.
Okay.
I can moderate the next one if nobody wants to.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Carlos. So we have our moderator for next time. Any other topics or anything else people want to discuss?
I'll be, I don't know if that's self-promotion, but October, I think the day before, the 23, I'll be in All Things Open. I'll be giving a OpenWhisk talk about Swift development. So the goal for the next week and a half is I'm going to start looking into the action loop that Michelle did. And also I think he's also starting doing Swift. So we see if we can do a Swift 4.2 with the action loop. But if anyone is going to be All Things Open, there's other talks about serverless, so it's cool.
Cool. Yeah, and if anyone's in the is October 30th, so that's something else to maybe get together and see people. Okay. All right. So it seems like we've hit the end of topics. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and see you on Slack and on GitHub.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.